The first time I heard her, I thought it was a glitch in the system. A whisper, barely there, slipping through the cracks of our sterile, controlled environment. We were so sure of our methods, so confident in our ability to separate the mind's phantom echoes from the tangible world. But that confidence shattered the moment three of us, standing in that dimly lit observation room, heard the same voice, a voice that wasn't supposed to exist. It started as an experiment in auditory hallucinations. We wanted to map the unseen, to dissect the whispers that plague the minds of those who hear what isn't there. Subjects were placed in isolation, their brains monitored as they described the voices only they could perceive. We recorded their accounts, cross-referenced neural patterns, and believed we were peeling back the layers of something purely psychological, until the day the walls answered back. The observation speaker was never meant to transmit sound. It was a one-way conduit designed for us to listen, not to be heard. But then, during Subject 9's session, something shifted. The room grew colder, the air thickened, and then her voice, soft, deliberate, threading through the silence like a needle. At first we dismissed it, a feedback loop, maybe a crossed wire. But when three separate staff members, standing in different corners of the room, turned to each other with the same unnerved expression, we knew. This wasn't an error. She spoke in fragments, a sigh, a half-formed word, and then, when Dr. Lowell hesitantly asked, "Who are you?" she answered, not with a name, but with a sentence that coiled around my ribs and squeezed. "You weren't supposed to hear me." The subject, strapped to the chair, hadn't reacted to any of it, not until the voice grew louder. Then, with a slow tilt of his head, he smiled, a smile that didn't belong in a clinical setting, a smile that knew too much. "You shouldn't have put her in the speaker," he murmured. We shut the experiment down that night, disconnected every audio feed, locked the observation room, and buried the data where no one would find it. But here's the thing about voices: once they're heard, they don't just disappear. They linger in the hum of a quiet room, and the space between breaths. Especially in silence, I still hear her. Sometimes, when the world is too still, her whisper curls around the edges of my thoughts, and I can't help but wonder, were we ever the ones conducting the experiment, or were we the ones being listened to all along? The mind is a fragile thing, but so is the line between what's real and what's imagined. And somewhere in that lab, in the space between a speaker and a scream, we crossed it. Now there's no going back. The first time I heard her, I thought it was a glitch in the equipment, a rogue frequency, a bleed of noise from some forgotten channel. But sound doesn't work that way. Sound doesn't listen. We called it Project Echo, an attempt to isolate auditory hallucinations from genuine sensory input. The lab was sterile, all white walls and humming servers, a place where madness was supposed to be measured, not invited. Subjects sat in soundproof chambers, wired to EEGs, whispering descriptions of voices only they could hear. We recorded everything, or so we thought. Then came session 17. 3 staff members, Dr. Lean, Patel, and myself, were monitoring Subject 9, a quiet man with a habit of tapping his fingers in Morse code no one recognized. His hallucinations were consistent. A woman's voice, low and urgent, repeating the same phrase, "You're not supposed to hear me." Standard stuff, until Patel stiffened at his console. "You getting this?" he muttered, Lean frowned, getting, "What?" That's when I heard it, too. A whisper, threading through the observation speaker, a channel meant only for us to speak to them. No subject audio fed into it. No external signals should have been there, yet there she was. The same voice Subject 9 had described. But now she wasn't speaking to him. She was speaking to us. "Turn it off." The words slithered out, soft as static, and the room froze. Patel's fingers hovered over the kill switch. Lean's breath hitched. I told myself it was interference, a feedback loop, anything but what it sounded like, something alive in the wires. Then Subject 9's voice crackled through the mic, eerily calm. "You shouldn't have put her in the speaker." The lab shut down. Audio protocols that night. No more live feeds, no more speakers. Just silent observation through glass and data scrolling across screens, but silence as a way of playing tricks. In the quiet between keystrokes and the hush of an empty hallway, I catch at the faintest exhale of a voice that shouldn't exist. And sometimes when the world goes still, she answers. Science demands proof, repeatability, control. But what do you do when the experiment starts observing you? We locked away the audio files, buried the incident reports, told ourselves it was contamination, a shared delusion. Yet here's the truth no dataset will ever capture. Some doors shouldn't be opened, some frequencies aren't meant to be found, and some voices, they remember how to scream. The lab was never silent. Even in the dead hours between shifts, the hum of electricity buzzed beneath the floors, the faint hiss of air conditioning whispered through vents, and the occasional flicker of a monitor screen cast ghostly blue light across empty workstations. But that was before she spoke, before the silence became something alive. It started with Subject 9, a man in his 40s, diagnosed with treatment-resistant schizophrenia. He sat in the isolation chamber, electrodes mapping the storm inside his skull, while we fed him randomized tones through headphones. Standard procedure. We were refining a model to separate imagined sound from external stimuli, a way to quantify hallucinations. He was calm, methodical, describing the voices as if reading a grocery list. Male, mid-30s, angry, female, child, singing off-key. Then, halfway through the session, he froze. His pupils dilated. "New voice," he said. "She's not mine." We assumed contamination, a glitch in the audio feed, maybe interference from another lab. But then the technician monitoring the observation speaker stiffened. "Did you hear that?" she asked. No one had, not until 10 minutes later, when the lead researcher, a man who prided himself on skepticism, slowly lowered his clipboard and said, "There's something in the feed." It wasn't on the recordings. Every playback was clean, yet 3 staff members, separated by soundproof glass, swore they heard the same thing, a woman's voice, barely louder, and a breath, threading through the white noise. Not random syllables, words responding. When the researcher muttered, "This isn't possible," the speaker crackled. "Not for you," the voice replied. Panic was a luxury we couldn't afford. Protocols demanded logic. We recalibrated the equipment, ran diagnostics, even swapped the speaker. Nothing explained it. Then Subject 9, who should have heard none of this, pressed his palm to the two-way mirror and said, "You shouldn't have put her in the speaker." His file noted, no history of clairvoyance. The lab director shut down audio testing the next day. Too many variables, he said, too much risk. But whispers don't obey orders. I started hearing her in the quiet moments leaning over a sink at 3 a.m., the space between songs on my drive home, always the same cadence, the same impossible intimacy, like a secret pressed directly into my ear. The others confessed the same. We never told the director. Some truths are too fragile for paperwork. Then came the morning. I found Subject 9's file marked terminated. Standard reassignment, they said. But his last note read, "She's louder when you listen alone." That night, I muted every device in my apartment and sat in the dark. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was waiting. Science demands evidence, but some questions aren't meant to be answered. They're meant to unravel you. The voice wasn't in the recordings, but she's in the silence. And now, so am I. The first rule of auditory research is simple. Sound cannot exist without a source. But that rule shattered the day we heard her. It started with silence, not the quiet of an empty room, but the thick, suffocating silence of a vacuum, a kind that makes your ears ring just to fill the void. We had spent weeks refining our methods, stripping away every possible external noise until all that remained were the voices inside our subjects' heads, or so we thought. The anomaly occurred during Subject 23's session. A college student with no history of psychosis, just a tendency to hear whispers when stressed, standard procedure, soundproof booth, EEG cap, a microphone to capture verbal responses. But halfway through, something shifted. The observation room where 3 of us monitored the feed suddenly felt colder. Then the speaker crackled, not with static, but with breath, the woman's voice. It wasn't on the recording. It wasn't in the booth. Yet all 3 of us heard the same words, clear as a bell. "You're listening too closely." We froze. Cross-contamination was impossible. The equipment was isolated, the audio feeds separate. But when we replayed the session, there was nothing. Just Subject 23's ragged breathing and the hum of machinery. We dismissed it as shared auditory glitch, stress playing tricks, until Subject 23 spoke unprompted, eyes fixed on the two-way mirror. "She says you shouldn't have put her in the speaker." The lab shut down the audio arrays that night. No more feeds, no more recordings. Just pen and paper and the weight of what we couldn't explain. But silence has a way of playing tricks. In the empty corridors between the echoes of footsteps, I'd catch at the faintest whisper, just beyond comprehension. Then the dreams started, visions of a woman with no face, standing in the observation room, her mouth moving in time with the static. I'd wake with her voice still cold in my ears, syllables dissolving before I could grasp them. The others admitted hearing it too, though we never spoke of it aloud. Some doors, once opened, shouldn't be acknowledged. The final report called it mass suggestion and buried the data. But I kept the original tapes. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I'll press play just to hear the silence, to wonder if she speak again. Because the truth is, we didn't isolate hallucinations that day. We invited something in. And now, in every quiet moment, I feel her waiting. Sound needs a source. But what if the source was never ours to begin with? The first time it happened, we told ourselves it was static, a glitch in the system, a rogue frequency bleeding through the observation speaker. But static doesn't whisper your name. Static doesn't answer questions. It started as a routine session. Subject 9, a middle-aged man with a history of vivid auditory hallucinations, seated in the soundproof chamber. His task was simple: describe the voices only he could hear. We'd spent months refining our methods, filtering imagined sound from genuine external stimuli. The lab was sterile, controlled, a fortress against contamination. But that day, the walls didn't matter. Dr. Lasky was the first to hear it. A woman's voice, faint but unmistakable, murmuring from the observation speaker, not through the subject's microphone, not through any channel we were recording, just there. She dismissed it as fatigue until Vargas, our audio technician, stiffened in his chair. His fingers froze over the console. "You hear that?" he whispered. Then Elliot, the intern, nodded, pale. "She's saying look up." The subject hadn't reacted. Not at first. He kept describing his usual hallucinations: a man shouting in a language he didn't recognize, footsteps in empty rooms, standard fare. But then the voice and the speaker grew clearer. Not a garbled frequency, words, deliberate. "Can you see me?" Vargas slammed his headset down. "That's not in the feed. That's not possible." Dr. Lasky ordered. The session terminated. The subject was removed, confused but compliant. As the team debriefed, theories spun like wildfire: cross-contamination, a prank, shared auditory pareidolia, anything but the truth. Because the truth was this: 3 trained professionals, isolated from each other, had heard the same impossible voice, and none of our equipment had recorded a damn thing. We scrubbed the system, replaced the speakers, ran diagnostics until our eyes burned. But 2 days later, during Subject 14's session, it happened again. This time the voice was louder. "You're listening now." The subject, a woman who'd never reported female hallucinations, jerked her head toward the observation window. "Who is that?" she asked. No one answered. The team was too busy staring at each other, at the unlit speaker, at the empty air where sound shouldn't exist. Then Subject 9 returned for a follow-up. He sat quietly for 10 minutes before suddenly leaning forward. "You shouldn't have put her in the speaker." His voice was calm. "Final. The room iced over." "Put who in the speaker?" Dr. Lasky asked. The subject didn't blink. "The woman you keep trying to record." That was the day the lab stopped using audio equipment entirely. Microphones were unplugged, speakers dismantled. We switched to handwritten notes, lip reading through the glass. Anything to avoid her, but silence didn't banish her. If anything, it made her stronger. Because now, when the world goes quiet, I hear her not through speakers, not through machines, inside my head. You were always the best listener. They say sound is just vibration, that voices are echoes of the living. But what if some sounds aren't meant to be caught? What if some voices don't come from throats or speakers, but from the spaces between? The lab is closed now. The files are sealed. But late at night, when the hum of the world fades, I press my palms to my ears and beg for silence. She laughs, and I realize we never isolated hallucinations. We set them free. The lab is silent now. Not the kind of silence that feels empty, but the kind that hums like a hell breath, like something waiting. The speakers have been unplugged for months. The microphones dismantled, the observation room stripped bare. Yet, Even now, when the air conditioning shuts off and the last colleague leaves, I hear her, a whisper just beyond the edge of perception. You shouldn't have put her in the speaker. It started as a routine experiment. Auditory hallucinations were nothing new. Neuroscience had long danced around the edges of imagined sound, trying to isolate the moment a brain conjures a voice from nothing. We thought we were mapping the boundaries of perception. We didn't realize we were knocking on a door. That day, 3 of us heard it. A woman's voice, soft but unmistakable, threading through the observation speaker like smoke, not recorded, not broadcast, just there. We exchanged glances, then questions. The voice answered, not in words we could transcribe, but in tones that called around our thoughts, shifting meaning like a half-remembered dream. The subject, a man who'd spent weeks describing his own private chorus of whispers, went very still. Then he said it, the words that shut the experiment down. You shouldn't have put her in the speaker. We told ourselves it was contamination, suggestion, a glitch in the equipment, or our own minds, frayed by weeks of listening for ghosts in the static. But the truth was simpler and worse. We had given her away, and sound is vibration, a physical thing. A voice, even an imagined one, moves through air, through walls, through flesh. What if hallucinations aren't just neural misfires? What if they're echoes of something else, something that wants to be heard? The lab's silence now feels like a confession. We stopped because we were afraid, not of the voice, but of the realization that we'd never been in control. I still hear her, in the hiss of rain against the window, and the muffled static of a dead channel, in the quiet of my apartment at 3 a.m. when the world holds its breath. She's fainter now, but persistent, a question without an answer. Maybe we were wrong about isolation. Maybe the voices were never inside the subjects' heads. Maybe we were the ones trapped in the box, peering out through the narrow window of our instruments, mistaking the edges of our perception for the edges of the world. The last thing the subject said to me before he left wasn't recorded in the notes. He leaned in, his breath sour with fear, and murmured, "She's not the only one." I didn't ask him to explain. Some doors, once open, shouldn't be closed. So here's the truth I carry like a stone in my pocket. We didn't find the source of auditory hallucinations. We found a crack, and through it, something found us. The lab's doors are locked, the data archived, but late at night, when the city noise fades, I press my ear to the quiet and listen. Not for her, not anymore, but for the others, the ones still waiting to be heard. Silence, after all, is just sound we haven't learned to hear yet.